Well, hey, I'm Tommy Ellison, and welcome to Senior Moments, my podcast. I go live at 5. That sounds like a title for maybe a newscast. Live at 5. Actually, I think I've already heard of that. But anyway, it's my podcast where, I can't necessarily remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I can, for whatever reason, tell you exactly what happened 20, 30, 40 years ago and in minute detail. And certainly today is no exception to that. I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. There's these memories that I call senior memories, senior moments that occur to me, and they typically occur in the middle of conversations. And so I'll make a quick note so I can remember to come back to them, because I've learned the hard way that if I don't immediately write it down, I will not remember it because it's a short-term memory. But anyway, I digress. So these are those little memories that come back to me as I attend certain events and engage in conversations, or I read something and it just kind of stimulates a thought. Excuse me. So, this particular memory that I want to share with you was actually triggered by, well, frankly, an event that took place yesterday. Back in about 1971, I had a wonderful experience to be a part of a ministry called Jonah Productions. It was a product from Inslee Baptist Church in Inslee, Alabama. And with all that said, the Jonah Ministries was started by the pastor, Bob Curley, who was a very forward-thinking, great guy, but on the cutting edge of communicating the gospel to people. And he wrote a play called Jonah in the Whale. And as it turned out, there was an opportunity for him to build a cast from members of the church there at Inslee. And they actually put that presentation on the beach down in Panama City for the summer of 1970. Had tremendous success. There were lots of great sponsors there in Panama City that helped them out. And to say the least, a lot of people's lives were changed because of it. But that kind of sparked the idea of having some other opportunities using Bible stories. Jonah was about, someone who was running from God, and that's kind of what the play was about. Some of you may have remembered perhaps going and seeing it. I'm not sure. If you did, leave a comment if you would. But the second play that Bob put together was called Daniel in the Lion's Den, and that was the play that I was cast in. It was about a 265-pound, 12-year-old football player who gets trapped in the temptation of falling into the lion's den, which in this case was all about addiction, drug and alcohol addiction. And so there was one other group that was at Fort Walton Beach that did a play on Noah and the Ark, and again about God's efforts to save a nation, and well, the Bible story, Noah and the Ark. And all this happened roughly 50 years ago in 70, 71, 72, 73. And looking back, we didn't know it at the time, but this was like prime time for Jesus Revolution, at least the Alabama version of it. The real Jesus Revolution that was taking place on the West Coast was running full stream, but it moved all the way to Alabama with what we were doing there and other people were doing. I can remember going to thing called Explo 72. It was in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, and Billy Graham spoke, and lots of other celebrities that came and gave their testimonies, and 60, 70,000 kids in the Cotton Bowl in Explo 72 in Dallas. it's a great opportunity. But my point being was, and if you saw the recent movie that was out not too long ago called The Jesus Revolution, that kind of captured the highlights of that movement back in the early 70s, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was kind of a, well, let's just say an opposition, so to speak, of traditional ways churches were reaching out to a new generation of kids that were going through a lot of different things in their life. And I guess because of Bob's forward thinking, you know, he had a opportunity to do these things, and more importantly, he had an opportunity to change the lives of those of us who were in the cast and the musicians and, you know, the lighting and the sound people that were working with us for all of these performances were taking place. As I said, Jonah was in Panama City. Daniel Maline's Den, we were in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, in an amphitheater called The Porch. It was an open amphitheater. And Noah and the Ark was in Fort Walton in a similar situation. Yeah, I can see Mike McGinnis. Let me change screens here a little bit. Mike, get your comment on there. He said he remembers it all well. He remembers it primarily because he and I were serving as youth directors, and this is 72 when we went to Expo. He and I joined forces. He was at Concord Highlands Baptist Church over in Hueytown. I was at Vestavia Hills Baptist Church in Birmingham, and we took kids out to the Cotton Bowl and had a wonderful time. I appreciate you chiming in on it with us, Mike. Hope you enjoy the podcast. But, you know, the whole, I guess, genre of worship was changing during that time frame, and you know, kids weren't into the what you would call the traditional methods of worship with, you know, hymns from the hymnal and sermons, and not to say that any of that was bad, but that was a generational thing. And you know, we kind of have a similar thing going on now with the praise music that a lot of churches have adopted. You know, they've done away with their hymnals and they're singing praise music, and I don't take anything away from them. I really don't. However, being 73, I'm really kind of more attuned to the old hymns because that's the way I learned to sing in church. I was raised Catholic, and so there wasn't a lot of singing going on in the masses, but the old hymns was something that I loved. But the thing about praise music is, well, let's face it, I don't know where the melody's going. I don't know if it's going up, it's going down, but I really love the idea of singing the scriptures, you know, singing the Psalms and Ecclesiastes and other passages from the Bible. I think that's really neat. It's just that melody line that I don't really know, and I'm just not into it. So therefore, you know, I'm a curmudgeon, I guess, when it comes to praise music. But with all that said, you know, what was the deal? What was the trigger here that caused me? Well, we had a reunion, and I want to give a shout out to David Downs, who was in the cast of Daniel with us, and he played the organ with us as a musician. He was on the albums. And David, who shared this dream that he and I had about getting all these people together, especially, you know, the work that it was going to take to, and in finding people was also kind of critical too. And, you know, we hunted them down, and as it turns out, there was about 20 people that showed up for this reunion, and it was a special time yesterday. David's wife, Sandy, did a super job offering, you know, their home and securing and preparing the food and the beverages that we served. And Sandy Flowers, the wife of Ken Flowers, who was the author of many of the songs in Noah and in Jonah, she brought a lovely cake, and she helped us really a whole lot trying to find a lot of people that had remained in contact with her. I'm going to switch over here because I brought a little movie here that I'm going to run in the background. If I can make sure it's not drowning me out here. But this was from yesterday, and I'll let you watch it as I talk. You know, my Sander was also involved in putting up with me as far as the actual preparation and the communication of the reunion to one another. And as I said, about 20 people made the trip. Two were kind of jockeying for who traveled the longest distance. Rick Carpenter thought he had the win coming from Dallas area. But as it turns out, Andy Flowers, who was the brother of Ken Flowers, the author I mentioned a moment ago, he actually makes his home in Utah. And no, Sandy, it's not Utah, Alabama. It's Utah like Utah with a U. And he took the prize for the one that traveled the farthest. Most of them were here and around in Alabama, but it tickled us that Andy and Rick both came in for this wonderful reunion. Rick Carpenter wrote a lot of the songs that were in Daniel and did a super job. We had a moment of silence and prayer in memory of several of the cast members and friends of the ministry who were no longer with us, which was a special time. And then there were a lot of stories told, stories about changed lives, people that came not knowing what the play was all about, not knowing what to expect, and yet in many cases they were able to bring Christ into their life and become followers of the way and Christ followers, and how that changed their life. And of course it changed the life of many of the cast members, because we were involved in an active ministry in a time when all of us were still searching for our own maturity in Christ. And there were a lot of war stories and special memories. Some were heart-rending. Sandy Flowers told a story of a drug addict that gave her life to Christ that night and actually lived with the cast because her parents had thrown her out of the house. And she cleaned herself up. She got sober. She got clean off the drugs. Spent the summer, got involved with Bible study, got involved with working with the ministry, and turned her life around, and even to the point where her parents brought her back into the fold and became a family again. You know, back then we sold albums, and we charged $5 a piece because it was helping to support the ministry. They were recorded locally in a studio over in Homewood. And in the course of preparing for this reunion, I did some work and edited some of them and put the songs together and kind of maybe did a little magic on the sound. And we put them on CDs and also on flash drives, and people got a little whale too, which I'm sorry I didn't bring one in here with me, but little tiny squeaker whale for a party favor. And then there were these other war stories about, you know, people snoring and just, you know, the circumstances of working, you know, with the other people. The story that Rick reminded me of that I had completely forgotten was when we weren't on the porch at Gatlinburg. We also on Sundays traveled to different churches, and even when we were through with the summer and had gone back to Sanford, Rick was a Sanford student, we were able to make some appearances at youth rallies around the state and in certain cases away from the state. But this particular time that Rick was reminding me about was we were on our way to Georgia, and we were running late, and we were in my dad's car, which is a big Buick Riviera, and we had the back of the trunk packed. It was a little tiny trunk to begin with. We had it packed with our gear, guitars, and things of that nature. And as I said, we were running late, and Rick over in Georgia, little hometown got pulled over by the local police. And he came up to the car and he said, "Son, do you know you are doing 65?" And Rick was driving and explained to him that he was trying to get to this church and that we were running late and we were part of a Christian group that were going over there to sing and present our program. And he said, "You don't believe me, do you?" And Rick said, "No, sir, I do believe you." And the officer looked at him and said, "No, I want you to see it. Come on back to my car. I want you to look at my radar and see you were doing 65. Turns out I think it was a 60 zone. So you know what's going on here." I guess their finances were running low, so they had to start passing out tickets somehow or another. The problem was, we told him we were late. He said, "You know what? Y'all need to come to the police station." And so he made us follow him to the local police station there, where we were more or less sat down in the lobby, and they began to talk to us and said that we needed to pay the check, pay the ticket. And I want to say it was about $75. And there was one problem. We probably had $5 to our name, because we would typically travel to a church. They would have the pimento cheese sandwiches, cutting quarters, and Kool-Aid, and we would have a snack supper as part of that experience. So we didn't have a whole lot of money. And I'm not sure, and Rick wasn't sure either, how we paid that ticket. I don't know if we called somebody's dad or if one of the girls in the cast had a credit card. I'm not sure, but I just remember that night we got pulled over, and we could not make them understand that we were really, really running late, and y'all are making us later. But anyway, one of the spin-offs, I guess you would say, of the Jonah ministry, Ainsley Baptist also started and ran what was called the One-Way Christian Nightclub. It was over near UAB, right there on 8th Avenue, where it turns into Green Springs, in an old building that was formerly Ollie's Barbecue. And Ollie McClung, who owned that building, had moved to a new location, so the building was sitting there empty. And Brother Curley talked Ollie into letting us use that building, and Rick was involved deeply in the cleanup of that building, and we started the One-Way Christian Nightclub, and we had a house band playing Jesus music, and we had a number of guests come in. Arthur Blessed came in when he was making his trek across the nation, carrying a cross. Pat Boone was there one night, give his testimony. He sang a song, if I recall. But it was a whole different experience, and it was a completely different, I guess you would say, worshiping God, worshiping Jesus experience that, obviously a lot of people had never seen or heard of, but it was a success. It was also a special time in all our lives, and not all the memories were good, but it was pretty good example of how time has a way of smoothing off the rough edges of our bad memories and leaving behind the good things that happen to us and to those around us. So I appreciate you listening to this special memory, this senior memory of mine that more or less came back alive this weekend. And if you're watching this live or maybe in the replay, thanks to all of you who attended the reunion and making it such a special occasion for me and for David and for all of those involved in the planning process. We really thank you for coming, and hopefully you'll see this little podcast of mine and let you know that we love you and God bless you, and let's do it again. I don't know how soon. I don't think we can wait another 50 years, but let's stay in touch. And for all of you who also are working and watching, we really appreciate you coming and being here with us this evening on Senior Moments. We're live at 5 every Sunday. See you next time with a special memory, a blast from the past. Y'all have a great day.